This video will deal with advantages and disadvantages of training methods. We're going to look first of all at on-the-job instructions. We're going to look at types of training that may be delivered within the work premises, within the work arena. What sort of training can operators or managers or personnel within the organization receive within the company itself or within the organization? So we start by looking at on-the-job instructions, the type of instructions that go with job specifications. What does the job require? And then looking at training methods which are aimed at elucidating those points, making those points clear to the operator and enabling the operator to carry out the tasks efficiently and safely. But it's also possible to have job rotation, to enable the employees to rotate their work, to take on different aspects of the job, so as to widen their experience. But it can also, of course, lead to greater motivation and greater application, because the workers don't become bored with just one aspect of the job. They have wider experiences, they're able to accomplish wider skill achievements, they're able to widen their skill set and to achieve high levels of productivity in other areas of the work. And that means they will be more motivated, they're more interested in engaging in the work process. So job rotation is not just an educational thing, it's not just related to education, it's not just related to widening their experiences on the job, but it also has a motivational factor. It could be that training could be related to shadowing. Sometimes companies pair up employees. One employee may have a lot of experience over many years and be quite adept at performing particular tasks. That employee may be watched by another employee who will learn from that first one's experiences. This is called shadowing. In other words, wherever the skilled employee goes, the other employee goes and watches how the job is done, how the job is carried out. So they're learning by watching and by cooperating with the skilled person. It could be that it could be project-related training. Sometimes companies wish to start a new project or change some aspect of their production system or change some aspect of the company, and this becomes a project, and then certain personnel are assigned to implement the project or implement the changes, and there may be training related to that, because the employees who have been allocated to implement the change or to bring about the change may not necessarily have the skills to do so, so they need to be trained. It can also be a case for coaching and mentoring. In other words, a bit like shadowing, a senior member of the workforce can coach, can train new members of the workforce and can mentor them, can guide them and help them when they get into problems, when they experience issues, when they're experiencing, let's say, an inability to perform the task efficiently. Then the senior member of the workforce may become involved and mentor the less experienced. So coaching, mentoring, shadowing is very similar. And these are ways in which on-the-job instructions may be disseminated out, and the types of training related to the type of job that's under consideration. Now let's look at on-the-job instructions in more detail. Now, these slides are going to contain quite a lot of information, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time just simply reading out the slide. It's not very productive. So I'm going to go across the slides in a fairly fast manner. But you should note the slide numbers, which is at the bottom right of your screen, and wind back to these points later. Make your own notes and pad out your notes. So I'm going to talk over these slides fairly fast so we can get through it. As you can see, we've got 70 slides to do. We're currently on slide 8. So we've got a lot to do, so I'm just going to go across these, pick out the major points, and then move on. So we're going to talk about on-the-job instructions, and we're going to look at the advantages and disadvantages of different approaches. For example, on-the-job instructions could be seen as cost-effective and economical. I'm not particularly keen on the word economical, but it's a word that's often used. I would say economic. However, they are cost-effective. That's the point. On-the-job instructions is a way in which jobs are clearly written up, clearly described. There's clear understanding, so they are quite cost-effective. Once the information's been captured, then they may be passed to the operators who know the sequence of how to perform the job. The trouble with this is that sometimes bad habits can be passed on as well. Senior members of staff who have perhaps undertaken the task for many years and who therefore have a lot of experience in performing the task, they may also quite accidentally pass on bad working practices because they themselves have modified the way they work and pass on bad practices as well. The trainee receives immediate feedback and improvements can be made. So when there's a mentor or someone helping, or let's say the trainee is shadowing someone and is watching somebody doing the job, it's possible to get immediate feedback. So that's an advantage. It's a good point. The problem is it can have a negative impact on productivity. The trainee, for example, can slow down the team. If and it's important that the employee has a go at trying to perform the task. If the employee takes too long or makes errors or even breaks whatever it was he or she was working on, then it slows down the team. It slows down the process, and of course productivity will be adversely affected as a consequence. The trainee and the instructor, if it's mentoring or shadowing or whatever, they will tend to build up a relationship. They will look to each other for support. They will know each other's limitations and capabilities. So there is a good working relationship between them. The disadvantage is there may be insufficient theory and knowledge. For example, the trainee is taught how to do it rather than why they are doing it. So it can lead to poor decision making. Many skilled people who have worked in industry for a long time know how to do the job. They're not quite sure why it works, perhaps. They're not quite sure what their technique is doing, or they're not quite sure why it works, but they just know it does work, and that's what's being passed on. So there's not a lot of knowledge being passed on between the mentor, let's say, and the person who is being mentored. Training is specific to its purpose, and there's a high transfer of learning. So it has got advantages. The trainee will see exactly how to do the job, will learn from someone who is competent in the area, who's skilled in the area, who's perhaps got a lot of experience. So it's a very specific learning environment. The trainee will learn how to do a specific task and do it well. It's not suited for large groups of trainees. Generally speaking, it's a one-to-one. If there's a large group, they won't all see what's happening, and they perhaps may not all have a chance to practice the skill, or so it's not suited for large groups. It's generally speaking, it's a one-to-one relationship. And that's what we mean by on-the-job instructions. Now, job rotation, I said earlier there are different advantages to this, and also there are disadvantages, as we'll see. But let's go through some points related to job rotation. There are opportunities to develop new skills and knowledge, experience different job roles. So it's good that employees have a chance to widen their skill base, to understand more about the tasks, more about the jobs, and understand what's required, and perhaps have a chance to work on different types of machinery and so on. The problem is it interrupts working patterns and schedules. There are new people, if you like, new employees working on unfamiliar areas, and this will upset the pattern of work. It'll upset the flow of work and the schedules, because they're learning by doing, but they don't have a lot of experience to start, so they're learning by doing, and that may mean a fall in productivity, slow down in the production process. They are just learning the system. So it's good that they have new experiences, but on the other side, it can be costly. Job rotation also increases productivity, as job rotation prevents boredom and demotivation. Now, this is what I was saying earlier. Job rotation is good for motivation. It gives people new experiences and motivates them. They don't get into a boring situation performing the same task day in, day out. They have new experiences. However, it's costly to train employees for different job roles. So just widening their competence levels and giving them wider experiences is good for motivation, but it does mean that they have to be trained, and that's costly. That is expensive. It allows employees to fill other job roles due to absenteeism. So when there is job rotation, if there is absenteeism, if some people are away ill, let's say, those roles can be filled by others who have had previous experience of doing that particular task because of job rotation. So there's more flexibility for management. It means that if people are away ill or for whatever reason, then others can step in and perform the task. But it has got a negative impact on productivity. It takes time to learn new skills and train employees. So there's a downside to job rotation. It helps management to identify hidden talent, and that's important. Within the workforce, there will be people who have got particular talents that may not be recognized, but when they have wider experiences of working on different parts of the production process within the organization, they may show particular talent in some area, and that should be flagged up to management because that's what they're best suited at. It doesn't mean that they should not engage in job rotation. They should still have wider skills and understand more of the organization, but there may be some particular part of it that they are particularly good at doing. Job rotation, however, may impact on the quality of the products and services. When job rotation occurs, it means that some workers may be asked to perform tasks that they're not very good at. They just simply don't have the competence to do it. It's agreed that it's good for their motivation, but it may also demotivate them to some extent when they find out that they're not doing a good job. But in addition to that, it impacts on the quality of their work. The outcome of their efforts may go into the production process and may be of inferior quality. Now that may be costly to the business, or even worse, it may get to the end and go to the customer, and the customer may be dissatisfied, I should say, with the product. Now let's talk about shadowing. I mentioned it at the start as well, and the advantages and disadvantages of each of these. Well, the observer gains experience of the job and its roles and responsibilities, so that's an advantage. The person observing the skilled worker who is performing the tasks, that the observer will get a greater insight into the job, the roles and responsibilities, have a greater understanding of the job. However, as I said again earlier, the observer may pick up bad habits from the other employees. In fact, the observer may pick up bad habits from the person being observed, from the expert. The expert may have found shortcuts that suit him or her, but may not suit everyone. Or the person who's gained the expertise over the years may have found shortcuts or bad habits, not doing particular functions or missing out particular parts, or so the person being mentored or shadowing, I should say, the person shadowing may observe bad habits and may pick those up. The observer has an opportunity to develop relationships with the team. The observer, the person who's doing the shadowing, may see the team working together and may have an opportunity to talk to them and understand the importance of each part and understand what they're doing, and hence develop a relationship with the team. There may also be a reluctance to share information, as some employees may feel intimidated. So sometimes workers who have built up an expertise in a certain process or a certain function may not want to share that information, because it may make them feel vulnerable, that if they share it, then someone else can do their job, and therefore they could lose their job. If they have a problem with the management, they may lose their job because someone else can now do it. So there may be a reluctance to pass on these skills. There are opportunities for future employment. So shadowing means that the person who is shadowing picks up the skills and may pick up a wide variety of skills, and that's a good opportunity for future employment, maybe within the organization or even indeed outside of the organization. But generally speaking, the organization tries to make the skills that are being passed on, make them specific to that organization, so they become worthless outside. But there are opportunities for employment, because the person shadowing will have the capability of performing those tasks, and those tasks may be required elsewhere in the organization. It can be difficult to schedule and can disrupt the working patterns, however. So shadowing has to be planned and set up, and how it's going to work in practice has to be established. Should the person shadowing stand beside the person performing the task? That might be getting in the way. If they stand too far back, they may not see what they want to see. Where should they stand, and should they speak or ask questions or interrupt, or it can disrupt the working pattern. They can observe and take part in tasks, and this of course will increase their confidence. If they're shadowing, they may ask to have a go, to be allowed to use the machine, or to do a particular task or to operate some particular piece of equipment. And that, of course, can increase their confidence. It can be demotivating if experience is voluntary with no pay, and sometimes shadowing can be like that. It's often the case that even graduates coming out of universities have to take up employment with no salary to try and get experience. And in a sense, it may not be shadowing as we're talking about here, but it can be demotivating. They're going to work and not getting any remuneration. They still have bills to pay, they're still human beings, and they still have costs and overheads. So it can be demotivating. So the person who is doing the shadowing, the person who is learning from the process, they should be compensated or helped out during this learning process. Now let's turn to project-related training. Look at the advantages and disadvantages of these. Well, the employee experience working in groups and take on leadership role. So the employee experience working in groups, so it's good. They're working on a project, they're working in a group, and they can watch out who is becoming the leader and who has got the best suggestions and who do people listen to. So they're able to look at the group dynamics and look at the processes within the group. They can learn because it's related to a project, to bringing in a project or to implementing a project, and they can learn from that. So the employees working in groups can observe the group working. It can, of course, result in disagreements within the groups, and individuals may not perform their tasks adequately. So simply because people are working on a project, working as a group in a project, doesn't mean they all agree. They may disagree. There may be constant arguing and disputes over how to do it, how to move forward. So group work is good, but care must be taken as how to handle the downsides. There are opportunities within groups to gain skills and experience, very similar to shadowing, simply by watching what other people are doing and asking opinions. And when a problem is encountered, there are people within the group who will offer advice and suggestions, and so skills are enhanced by this process. However, it's difficult to organize team meetings when employees have other jobs and duties to complete. So sometimes projects are not properly funded or recognized within the organization, and therefore the members of the group have to do other jobs, and therefore there's a coordination problem. When to get the group together, what times are available, and can everyone attend at that time? Projects are aimed at a purpose and meet organizational aims and objectives. And again, members of the group will see this. They'll see that the project is aimed and it's got a purpose. It's going somewhere. It's aiming to achieve something and to meet the organizational meet the organizational aims and objectives. The least confident group members tend to become overshadowed by more confident group members. Within any group, there'll always be leaders and dominant personalities, and the less dominant, who perhaps are also very skilled, they become overwhelmed by the more dominant ones. So there will be a lot of issues associated with the group and who leads the group and who should be listened to, and sometimes the people who have this strong personality, they're not always the best. They don't have the best suggestions or the best experience. Develop team working skills. All team workers share a common goal, so it's easier to complete tasks. Now, coaching and mentoring. Let's look at the advantages and disadvantages of these. Well, it's quite a flexible approach. Learning is at the pace of the learner needs. So the learning pace is dictated by the learner. The learner is doing the job or working on the project, and really only needs advice when he or she is going wrong or going off track. And in this case, the more experienced member who's perhaps mentoring will step in with advice and recommendations and suggestions, and also some analysis as to why it went wrong. The problem with coaching and mentoring is that the mentor or the coach may not have the right skills or qualifications. He or she may think they have. They may think that they are the best for the job, but in fact they're not. And there is a problem that what they believe to be the case should be the case. So if they believe they've got the right skills, then they should have the right skills, but it's not always the case. Sometimes their personalities may be wrong, sometimes their knowledge may be wrong, or may not be adequate enough. So there are issues about the quality of the mentoring. Generally speaking, feedback is instant and improvements made on the job. So when there's an issue, it's dealt with immediately. There's no waiting about, no hanging about waiting. So the feedback is immediate, and that's good. Senior management and staff may be unwilling to take on the task of mentoring, especially if the additional responsibility is unpaid. And that's always a problem. Who will be the mentors? Does the organisation compensate the mentors? Do they get extra pay for doing it? Or is it just simply something that's added on? So in that case, senior people may be reluctant to take on someone to mentor them. Trainee is self-motivated and willing to learn. Generally speaking, in a mentoring situation, the trainee is self-motivated and willing to learn. The trainee is trying to learn the procedures, learning the tasks, learn the operations, and generally speaking, they're motivated and willing to learn. It is a time-consuming task and requires motivation and dedication from the trainee and the mentor. So both the trainee and the mentor should be enthusiastic about what's happening. So these are some of the advantages and disadvantages of coaching and mentoring. Now let's turn our attention. These are on-the-job issues. Now let's turn our attention to there's one last one I should say. Opportunities to work with senior managers and staff. Well, yeah, those who are being mentored do have an opportunity sometimes to work with senior management and staff. Not always, but they may have, and if they have, that's a bonus. That's something to be welcomed, and the person being mentored will be fortunate if they get some time from the senior managers and staff. It may be that the mentor has a poor work ethic, and this can have adverse effects on the trainee. The mentor, him or herself, may not be a paragon of virtue. They may arrive late to work, or have bad working practices, or have bad attitudes towards the organisation or towards many issues, and may not be very helpful. So that's a downside. Okay, now we have genuinely finished the on-the-job part of this class. Now let's turn our attention to off-the-job training and look at types of training that are available off-the-job training. Well, there can be courses or e-learning. That's one form of learning off the job. There could be just reading or case studies. That's a form of learning, and it's a valuable form of learning indeed, where people can read a case study and discuss a case study that relates to a similar situation that they find themselves in. So we have that type of study. Of course, we have lectures and seminars, which could also be used as a form of off-the-job training. There could be outdoor training sometimes. Companies may have away days or organize events and try to build teams or have some sort of training which is, again, off the job. There could be business-related games. Popular in many business schools, business games are set up to simulate businesses and the complexity of businesses. Teams try to run businesses to perhaps generate additional profits or higher profits than the competitors and so on. So business related games. It gives the management, the wider management and senior staff an opportunity to feel what it's like to have to run the business. There could be role play, behaviour modelling. So as again, it's a type of off-the-job training method. Now let's talk our way through these and look at some advantages and disadvantages of each of these in the same way that we did with the on-the-job training methods. We'll start with courses and e-learning. Well, a flexible approach for a start. Learning takes place around the learner's schedule. So generally speaking, with e-learning in particular, the learner can access the material more or less any time. It's available online, so they can access it from home or access it during the lunchtime or whenever. So it's quite a flexible approach to learning. However, learners with low motivation and poor study skills will fall behind. So it does only work for learners with good motivation and who apply themselves to try and use the material and learn from it. There is no routine structure of the classroom environment. They don't have to be at the class at 9 o'clock in the morning or at the class in the afternoon or whatever. They simply access the material when they want. It's available day and night, any time. So e-learning material is very flexible, but that can lead to problems for learners with low motivation. They may simply choose to ignore it. Generally speaking, online courses are cheaper and more accessible. And of course there's no cost involved in travelling. Learners can become isolated as they can be limited face-to-face contact, and that is a constant criticism of e-learning, that we do like to talk to people about issues and we do like face-to-face discussions, and if everything is online then we miss the, if you like, the social part of learning, and that is important. Learning is tailored to the learner's needs. Generally speaking, because it is so flexible, it can be tailored to the learner's needs. What do they need to know? And then the classes are made available to bring that material to the learner. There may be technology issues. It may be difficult to access online resources. It depends on the speed of the internet and the location of the learners. They may be in areas where there is very little internet, or it may be that their technology is not up to date and perhaps the learning material is more advanced, requires more advanced software, or it may be slower to load because of speed, or there may be bandwidth limitations or whatever. So there could be technological issues in e-learning. It does build self-knowledge and learner confidence. Learning is geared to the learner's pace, so it does build self-knowledge. The learner gets to learn about him or herself and their application, their dedication to achieve, their dedication to work on the particular problem and to deal with the problems, and to deal with them in isolation. They're dealing with them online. They're able to read the problems, solve the problems, and post results and so on. So they're working independently. They need to be IT literate, of course, and demonstrate computer-based competency. They must be familiar with computers and they must be IT literate, otherwise it can't happen. Reading and case study. Well, the use of case studies helps to analyse complex concepts and theories. Case studies are very effective because situations that are similar to the one perhaps within the organisation, or the case study is very similar in structure to the development of the particular company that the people are working for. If they read the case, they're able to read about the complexity of the situation and get a greater understanding of their own organisation as a consequence. However, it's a time-consuming exercise, particularly in short training courses. In short training courses, when the tutor gives out a case study, it takes a lot of time to read the case study, to understand it, go back over it, and then finally discuss it. And that could be a large proportion of the training course time taken up. Clearly, tutors try to find ways around this by perhaps disseminating the information in advance. So the attendees at the course will have read the case study in advance and become prepared to discuss it. It's a more efficient way of dealing with the situation. Learners can relate to real-life situations and apply solutions to workplace problems. So it is good because they get a greater understanding of the workplace problems. However, it is difficult to find relevant case studies. There are many case studies available, but they may not be exactly the ones required for the particular organisation. So there might be issues with that, with finding the appropriate ones. Reading develops knowledge of concepts and theories and their applications. So some case studies explain the underlying theory and underlying causal connections, what's causing what, and understand the logic of the situation. So there can be a deeper understanding as a consequence of reading the case study. However, with many case studies there can be more than one answer. Different people have different perspectives on the right solution. So there's an issue with case studies that when different people read the same case study, they may come up with different solutions. So generally speaking, there's no one answer for case studies. It encourages a range of skills: analytical, communication, team working and problem solving. When people work on a case study, they generally work on it as a small team or a group. They will try to analyze the different issues. They may break it up and look at different functional areas of the business. Some people may concentrate on the sales figure, or someone else may concentrate on production or whatever. So they're trying to be very analytical and very specific about their learning and about their approach to the case. But it does encourage a range of skills. The method is suited to an advanced level of training rather than basic training. It does require maturity. It requires understanding and maturity and a considerable amount of perhaps experience before case studies are properly understood. So it's not for junior levels of training or of management. It's for really most effective with more senior management, more experienced management, and perhaps people who've been through more arduous training programs, perhaps MBAs or degrees in business or whatever. Lectures and seminars. Well, this is a good method for a large group of students. Lectures can be very large. They can, depends on the size of the lecture theatre really. but lectures can be very good for large groups of students. So I suppose in that sense it is a very efficient way of imparting knowledge. It does not meet all learning styles. People can learn in different ways. People can learn from reading, from watching a video, from reading online, from talking to their friends, from having discussions and group interactions. People learn in a whole variety of ways. So the lecture or the seminar is not necessarily the best way for everyone. People learn differently. Learning aims and objectives can be set to a pace of the learner, making this more student-centered. So it can be the case that the lectures or the seminars can be based on the perceived learning skills of the recipients, of the students. Their learning skills may be limited in certain ways. They might find it difficult taking notes whilst listening, or they might find it difficult in assimilating some sort of theories or background concepts and so on. So it can be organized in a way that addresses those needs. However, many lecture programs have got a syllabus and they must deliver the syllabus. So the person delivering the lectures or the seminars will have pressure to ensure that the learning outcomes of that particular session are met. So even though the students or the recipients or the participants, even though they have specific needs and requirements, and the person delivering the session may understand this, they have still got to deliver the material that covers the learning outcome. The disadvantage is it's one-way learning. The recipients, the students, let's say, sit there and receive the knowledge. They don't actively participate. And the lecturers dictate information to the learners. So the information flows in one direction, just from the lecturer to the student. With other forms of learning, even with going back to on-the-job learning, say for example in mentoring, the mentor may make suggestions, but the person receiving the suggestions may question that. It's a two-way process. But with lectures, it is a one-way process. It could be that large amounts of information are communicated in a lecture, and this may be very challenging for the student. Sometimes students can be overwhelmed by the amount of information that was put across in, let's say, one single lecture. Putting it simply, they may be completely overwhelmed and intimidated by the whole experience. They don't know where to start. They leave the lecture theatre thinking, how do they cope with this information? How do they deal with it? Where do they start to deal with it? It was too much. And of course, that is a problem that the lecturer, the person giving the information, should really have factored in during the preparation of the lecture. But then again, as I said earlier, the lecturer also has a problem of making sure that they have met the learning outcome of that session. So maybe it's a design issue that goes right back to the design of the course that's been delivered, not just that particular lecture. But students are in a passive rather than active role, and this may hinder learning. The students are passive. They're receiving it. They're just sitting there receiving this knowledge. They're not actively doing anything. They're not researching it, or perhaps their contributions are not being taken on board or integrated into the class. So they are in a very passive role. The lecturer has better control. The lecturer has control over the situation. People sit quietly and write notes, and that's it. The so the lecturer is in complete control of that situation. Of course, the lecturer must have good speaking skills and also have good subject knowledge in order to engage the student. It's important that the lecturer is able to vary the presentation to maintain interest in the lecture. Now, outdoor training, well, the advantages and disadvantages of this: develop team working skills and relationship with colleagues. Well, they're outdoor, they're away from their work environment, so they tend to develop better working skills, team working skills, and also better relationships with their colleagues. They're away from their routine environment. It can be costly to set up and very time consuming. It may take a day or a few days, and it is costly, so that's a disadvantage. It encourages team working and problem solving skills. If it's properly done, then the team will be given a problem to solve and they'll have to work together to try and solve it. It's not suited for everyone's learning needs. Some employees may dislike working in groups or attending learning events. Some employees may learn more by working on the problem themselves, by studying the problem and perhaps asking just some small amounts of information, small amounts of help, and trying to solve out the problem, and they will have a deeper understanding as a consequence. So not everyone learns from perhaps working in teams and working in outdoor training events. Activities such as role plays and games help with employee motivation. So when they're away from the workplace, then role plays and games, business games that is, can help with employee motivation. Role plays give them an opportunity to experience situations that perhaps they see others doing and they think it's easy, but when they find themselves in that role play situation, they find difficult. Can have a negative impact on productivity if all the employees are not attending a scheduled day at work. So it does mean that it has to be accounted for. The loss of output for that day has to be accounted for. Attending conferences and seminars enables networking skills. If the employees attend a conference where other companies are attending, or perhaps academics or politicians or whoever, they're able to network. They're able to talk to those other people and perhaps exchange information, exchange details, and get a greater understanding of the overall situation, because they're able to meet these people face to face and talk to them. So there's better opportunity for networking. Now, business related games. Well, encourages problem solving skills. So the person participating in the business related game has a greater understanding of the constraints and problems and issues confronting decision makers in business. Can cause boredom of activity if the activity is not suited to at the right level. So the business game has to be sufficiently complex, but not overly complex. It should really address the skills and aptitudes and abilities of those taking part. Sometimes business games can be too complex, which can lead to frustration. Sometimes they're too simple, which can lead to boredom. Should be related to real-life scenarios and demonstrates principles and concepts. So business games should be realistic. In other words, the participants or those taking part in the game should understand the game and should understand that it reflects to some extent real life, and they can relate to the issues in the material that's been given out as a part of the game. They can relate to it from their own experiences in working. They can see issues working in groups, problems with machinery, breakdowns, delivery issues, financial problems, cutbacks, innovation, change, new technology, globalization. They can see these issues. So perhaps the case study should reflect those. The learner is guided through the correct procedures, but may not understand the logic behind the actions. And that's a problem with case studies. Sometimes people try to work out what the solutions are, but they don't quite understand why the solutions will work or not work. They don't have a great understanding of the issues that underpin the problems. They don't perhaps understand the underlying issues, the factors that are leading to the problems in the first place. So they don't have a good, if you like, theoretical base upon which they base their decisions. The activities are fun and entertaining and encourages motivation. It can be the case that business games are fun and entertaining, particularly some games where perhaps groups of workers or groups of participants are given essentially the same case but different facets of the case, so they all work as a different company within an industry and they're competing with each other to see who can make most profits at the end of the day. It's a fun activity and entertaining, and there's a high level of motivation because they're trying to outwit each other and make more sales and so on. It can cause unnecessary pressure if employees are put under unfavourable circumstances. Sometimes with business games, if people make bad decisions, they feel that this may reflect on their chances at work. It may go on the record as the people who made silly decisions with the business game and therefore are not reliable. So they may get stressed over their decision making on the game, and therefore they may be reticent in making suggestions. They may be reluctant to participate indeed. Builds team cohesion and encourages healthy competition. Well, yes, it does build team cohesion because people have to work on the game and perhaps collaborate and share knowledge and share experiences and so on. Or it may also be the case that one of them is the winner and the rest are not, so that one has to be fought for. That position of winner has to be fought for, and there may be competition between them to try and see who is the best at performing in this game. Generally speaking, however, it does not encourage critical thinking. By and large, business games do not involve critical thinking. They're more involved with the processes and trying to work out strategies which will enable them to win under the circumstances in which they find themselves. Now, role play and behavioural modelling. Well, interactive activity and fun to take part in. That's the idea behind role play. They're able to pretend to be someone else. They're able to pretend to be the managing director. So it's a fun thing, and they're able to interact with others as if they are that other person. It's an opportunity to become someone else, to have a different function and have all the responsibilities and power and status that perhaps that function bestows. Not all learners will take part, especially if they are shy. It can be threatening and intimidating to some. So not all learners will take part in this type of activity. It's the more extrovert people who will want to participate in this type of role play behaviour modelling. It does encourage experiential learning. learners are put into real life situations and they can learn from their experiences in that role. Even though the role is not permanent, they've had the experiences, and that may be a valuable learning experience for them in their day-to-day lives. It doesn't put the learner in a real life situation. Role play is a controlled activity, and it's mainly guided. So it's not very realistic. It is controlled and it is contrived, and there may be observers who are guiding the role and making suggestions and keeping the game running. So it's not very realistic. But there are opportunities, having said all of that, for the people who are participating to consider their experiences later, to reflect on their experiences and perhaps gain something out of it. Concepts and principles can be portrayed through role-play activities. It is possible to get some understanding of underlying principles from role-play. Just it has to be questioned whether they could be more efficiently achieved by just simply reading a book or going to a lecture or getting it in another form. Is this the most efficient way of getting an understanding of the concepts and the principles? But having said that, people who engage in this type of activity, they may get some insights and some understanding that perhaps otherwise they would not have achieved. If it's not carefully constructed, it can confuse, particularly if there's a large number of groups of learners. So it can lead to chaos, in fact. If there's a large number, then there could be utter confusion amongst them as to who's doing what and what their roles are and what they're expected to do. So it has to be carefully designed and carefully worked out, or it could be a disaster, it could be a complete waste of time. It allows the learners to be confident and encourage critical thinking. Well, it allows the learners to be confident because they're able to take on a different role. So they are confident. They're confident enough to become someone else with different status, different obligations, different requirements, and so on. And they do have to think about their position and work out strategies and carefully understand the significance of what they're doing and the courses of action that they're suggesting. It's difficult to assess, however, if learning is taking place. As I said earlier, it may be better, more efficient, if the same people were to attend a lecture and simply take notes, write down the notes and go to a seminar and then discuss them. Is that a more effective, a more productive way of learning than going through this type of process? So what we've done here in this session is we looked at on-the-job learning and off-the-job learning. We've looked at the advantages and disadvantages of different types of approaches to learning on the job, or training on the job, training off the job, learning on the job, learning off the job. So we've looked at different approaches, two different types, both on the job and off the job, and different types, and the advantages and disadvantages of each. And that's all we're going to deal with in this video. So it's been quite a long video. I suggest very strongly that you go back over it many times, stop it, play it forward, make your own notes off the slides here, and perhaps raise the issues and discuss them with your colleagues also. But let's leave it at that now and say thank you for watching.